Hi folks, and welcome back to another 5 Minute Friday here on Meaningful Money. It's great to have you with me once again. You ready for the weekend? Now, this video is a follow-up to the first ever 5 Minute Friday 14 or 15 weeks ago. And it's necessary because something has happened recently which calls into question a little bit what I spoke about in that episode. So before I go into any detail, let's put 5 minutes on the clock down here and let's dive in. Now, the first ever 5 Minute Friday was called Is My Money Safe? And in that video I talked about if you invest with an investment manager, there is often a nominee involved, and what the nominee does is actually hold the money and hold the assets that you invest in, and the investment manager gives instructions to that nominee. And the idea is that there's a separation between your money and the funds of the investment manager so that they can't dip into your cash if they get into a spot of bother. We also talked about a set of rules called the client money and asset rules, which are designed to segregate your funds from the provider's money. And of course we talked about the financial services compensation scheme and all that jazz. But in the last few weeks, a company called Beaufort Securities Limited has been placed into administration by the Financial Conduct Authority, which is the industry regulator in the UK. And the reason this is important is because in the winding up of that company, there are obviously costs involved with that, and client money has been used or will be used to fund those costs. Now, one thing that's important to understand is that with Beaufort Securities, they were their own nominee. Separate company, but basically the same people involved. So you had Beaufort Securities Limited and Beaufort Securities Clearing Services Limited, which was the nominee. Now, the FCA clearly had concerns about Beaufort because they issued various warnings and stuff to them from 2016, but things finally came to a head earlier this year. Now, listener and viewer Andy brought this particular situation to my attention because he was concerned about whether his money was safe, not specifically with Beaufort in his case, but with any provider. If that provider goes bust, can client money be used to pay for the administration and winding up costs? And the answer to that is yes, because of some little known legislation. I mean, little known. I had no idea this existed until this whole thing blew up. And those regulations are called, and I've got to look at my notes for this, the Investment Bank Special Administration Regulations 2011. And the FCA have called on those regulations to enable the wind-up costs being charged by PricewaterhouseCoopers to be paid for out of client money and assets. Clearly, this is a concern. We need to understand, though, a little bit about what's gone on here. So let's say you had this amount of money invested with Beaufort Securities. It turns out that in the winding up, some assets are missing or unaccounted for at this stage. So you've automatically got a little bit of a loss there. It's looking likely that that'll be the case anyway. Then PwC have said that the costs per investor with Beaufort are likely to be around £10,000. And so we've got to take that off the money that you or our sort of sample investor held with Beaufort. Now, if those two things added together, the missing assets and the £10,000 costs, if those two added together amount to more than the £50,000 compensation scheme limit, then it may be that you're out of pocket. PwC reckon that 10% of all Beaufort's investors will experience some loss even after the thing is wound up. So the costs are going to be paid by the compensation scheme, but essentially that's taken off your £50,000 protection. And so you're really only getting £40,000 worth of actual asset protection in this case. So what should you do about this? What's the implications? Well, I think the only way to be absolutely 100% certain that if your provider goes bust, you will get your money back is to keep less than £50,000 with any one financial institution. Now, that's okay for most of us, but imagine if you had £3 million and you had to split that into £50,000 lumps. And what happens when the £50,000 grows so that it's more than that? You've got to sort of carve a bit off and open yet another account. It's going to be an administrative nightmare. But it's the only way to be sure that your money is protected. I think one important factor of the Beaufort situation is that they acted as their own nominee. Clearly the same people behind it, even though they were two different companies. Maybe when you're looking for an investment provider, you could consider one which has a third-party nominee, just to provide an additional sort of degree of separation between your money and the people who are actually running it. That's not to say that an investment company which acts as its own nominee is a bad idea. There's plenty of great firms doing that. It's just something to consider. And finally, you could ask your financial advisor or your investment manager for a document which outlines what the protection situation is for your money if your provider goes bust. They should have thought about that in advance, and the document should at least reassure you as to what would happen if. So ask for that document and make sure you're happy with the answers in it before you invest. So this is an interesting sort of turn of events, really, all come about since I shot that original 5 Minute Friday video. So as ever, I'm committed to bringing you hot off the press, state-of-the-art, up-to-date financial information, and I hope that it's useful and that you enjoyed it. If you haven't already, hit subscribe to the channel so that my new videos end up in your feed. You can even hit the little bell so that you'll be notified, and hit the thumbs up because that just helps other people find these videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next Friday.